I am Thomas Anderson. I'm 64 years old, and 4 weeks ago,
I never
I held
imagined
my
the journey
wife's
would take
hand
me so
as they
far,
closed her
but
casket.
looking back,
But before the
I
last
wouldn't
guest
change a
even
single
left her
moment
wake,
of the
my
winding
stepson
path.
looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You've got 72 hours to sign over the restaurant, old man. Mom's gone. Your free ride is over." He thought I was just a washed-up short-order cook who got lucky marrying his mother. He thought I had nothing without her signature on the papers. He had no idea that by Monday morning, he wouldn't be opening our restaurant for the breakfast rush. He'd be opening the door to a police interrogation room. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled his entire scheme, please drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you believe that loyalty is built in the kitchen, one plate at a time, hit that subscribe button right now. The rain was coming down hard that November afternoon in Portland, Oregon. The kind of rain that feels personal, like the sky is crying with you. Margaret had been gone for 2 weeks, and I still couldn't believe I was standing at her graveside. 42 years. We'd been married for 42 years, and suddenly she was just gone. The doctors said it was complications from her diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, the kind she'd had since she was a kid. She'd managed it her whole life with insulin injections, careful diet, regular checkups. She was religious about it, more disciplined than anyone I'd ever known. And then one morning, she didn't wake up. Diabetic coma, they said. Her blood sugar had dropped too low during the night. It happens sometimes, they told me. Even with careful management, sometimes it just happens. I watched them lower her into the ground next to the headstone I'd already picked out for myself one day. My hands were shaking, not from the cold rain, but from something else, something I couldn't name yet. Standing next to me was Daniel, my stepson. Technically, my stepson, but I'd raised him since he was 8 years old. His biological father had walked out when he was a baby, never looked back. When I married Margaret, I became the only father Daniel ever really knew. I taught him to ride a bike, helped him with his homework, walked him through his first heartbreak, paid for his college tuition. Every single milestone, I was there. He was wearing an expensive black suit that I didn't recognize. His dark hair was slicked back with too much gel, and he kept checking his phone every few minutes, like he was waiting for something more important than his mother's burial. I noticed his hands were trembling slightly, and there was a thin film of sweat on his forehead despite the cold. Our neighbors from the restaurant stood in a cluster nearby. Rosa, our head waitress, who'd been with us for 20 years, was sobbing into her husband's shoulder. Frank, the dishwasher who we'd given a chance when no one else would, couldn't stop shaking his head. But Daniel kept checking his watch, like he had somewhere better to be. The wake was at Anderson's Diner, the restaurant I'd built from absolutely nothing 38 years ago. It started as a tiny breakfast place with 6 stools and a dream. Margaret and I worked 16-hour days for years, serving eggs and pancakes at 5 in the morning, cleaning grills at midnight. We poured every penny we made back into the place. Slowly, we expanded. Added tables, then a full kitchen, then a second dining room. Anderson's became a Portland institution. Politicians came for our meatloaf. Celebrities passing through town would stop by for our famous blackberry pie, Margaret's recipe. The walls were covered with photos from 4 decades of memories, and every single brick in that building represented blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The funeral guests filled the restaurant, eating the food we'd catered from our own kitchen because that's what Margaret would have wanted. People told stories about her kindness, about how she'd given free meals to homeless folks during the winter, about how she'd mentored young waitresses and taught them life skills beyond just carrying plates. I sat in my usual corner booth, the one where I'd eaten breakfast every single morning for 38 years, and I just listened to people remember the woman I'd loved more than my own life. One by one, the guests started to leave. Rosa hugged me tight and whispered, "We miss her so much, Tom. We'll keep the restaurant going, just like she'd want." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As the sun started to set, the dining room emptied out. That's when Daniel made his move. He walked over to my booth, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the tile floor Margaret and I had laid ourselves 20 years ago. He'd changed out of his suit jacket into a polo shirt and jeans, and his whole demeanor had shifted. The fake grief was gone. In its place was something hard and calculating. "Okay, Tom," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Let's talk business." I looked up at him. My throat was tight with unshed tears. "Daniel, your mother's been in the ground for less than 6 hours. Can this wait?" "No, it can't wait," he said flatly. He pulled a folder from his leather messenger bag and slapped it on the table between us. "Mom and I had a conversation about 3 weeks before she died. She wanted to make sure I was taken care of, that I'd have something to inherit. So she signed over her 50% ownership of Anderson's to me. It's all legal, notarized, done deal." He pushed the folder toward me. "You own 50%. I own 50%. But here's the thing, Tom. I'm selling. I already have a buyer, a corporate restaurant group out of Seattle. They want to turn this place into another location for their chain. They're offering $2.8 million. I stared at him. The words felt like punches to the gut. "Daniel, this restaurant is our life, your mother's legacy. We built this together." "You built it," he corrected. "And now I'm cashing out. The thing is, Tom, I need your signature to complete the sale. As co-owner, you have to approve. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign these transfer papers, and we'll split the money, $1.4 million each. You can retire, go live on a beach somewhere, whatever old guys do." I reached for the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a document dated 3 weeks ago, transferring Margaret's ownership share of Anderson's Diner LLC to Daniel Anderson. Her signature was at the bottom, witnessed and notarized by someone named Robert Chen. "Margaret would never sell this place," I said quietly. "She loved this restaurant. It was her whole world." "She loved me more," Daniel said. His voice had an edge to it now, impatient and sharp. "And she knew I needed money to start my own ventures. Tech investments, Tom. The future. Not flipping burgers for blue-collar workers." He leaned forward, and I could smell something on his breath. Not alcohol, something medicinal and sharp. "You've got 72 hours to sign the transfer papers and agree to the sale. If you don't, I'll force a buyout through the courts. And trust me, that'll cost you way more in legal fees than you'll get in the end. Sign now, take your money, and walk away clean." I looked at his face. This kid I'd raised from a boy. I'd taught him to make pancakes when he was 10 years old. I'd stayed up with him when he had nightmares after his goldfish died. I'd been there at every graduation, every birthday, every moment that mattered. And now he was looking at me like I was just an obstacle between him and a pile of cash. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger yet. Something quieter and more dangerous. 72 hours, I repeated. "That's right. Sign by Monday morning, or I file the lawsuit Monday afternoon." He stood up, grabbing his folder. "Oh, and Tom, you should probably start looking for a new place to live. The apartment upstairs comes with the property. Once the sale goes through, you'll need to vacate that too." The apartment upstairs. The home Margaret and I had shared for 38 years. The bedroom where I'd held her hand every night. The kitchen where we'd tested new recipes together. The living room where we'd watched our life unfold through the window overlooking our restaurant. "Daniel," I said quietly, "this is a mistake." He laughed. It was a cold sound, empty of anything that looked like the boy I'd raised. "No, Tom. Marrying my mother was your mistake. Thinking you'd get to keep all this just because you stuck around. The mistake was mine for waiting this long to take what's mine." He walked toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and one more thing. I'll be managing the restaurant until the sale closes. Starting tomorrow, I'm taking over operations. You can still work the kitchen if you want, but I'm the boss now. Got it?" I watched him leave. Through the window, I saw him climb into a brand new BMW that I'd never seen before. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the parking lot like he was escaping something. I sat in that booth for another hour after he left. The restaurant was dark, except for the security lights. I looked around at the photos on the walls, at the counter where I'd served thousands of meals, at the kitchen where Margaret had perfected her blackberry pie recipe through years of trial and error. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. The woman who answered was Patricia Martinez. She was 48 years old, sharp as a chef's knife, And she'd been our business attorney since we incorporated Anderson's Diner 15 years ago. She'd helped us set up the LLC structure, handled our contracts with suppliers, managed our permits and licenses. She was more than our lawyer. She was family. "Tom," she said, her voice immediately soft with concern. "How are you holding up?" "Patricia," I said, "I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning, and I need you to bring every document related to Anderson's Diner, LLC. Everything." There was a pause. "Tom, what's going on?" I told her everything. Daniel's ultimatum, the transfer documents, the 72-hour deadline, the threat to force me out of my home. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end.
Under the dim
Then Patricia
light
said, "Don't
that
sign
I truly
anything, Tom.
found my
Don't agree to
purpose."
anything. I'll meet you at my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow." And Tom, Daniel picked the wrong family to steal from. I checked into a hotel that night. I couldn't bear to sleep in the apartment, knowing Daniel might show up. The room was clean and anonymous, and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, looking at photos of Margaret. There was one from our wedding day, both of us so young and full of hope. One from the day we opened Anderson's, covered in paint and exhausted but smiling. One from last Christmas, her wearing the apron I'd bought her, laughing at something I'd said. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rosa, our head waitress. "Tom, Daniel showed up at the restaurant this morning and told everyone he's the new owner. He fired Frank and 2 of the line cooks. He says we're changing the menu. What's happening?" I typed back slowly. "Don't worry, Rosa. Just do your job, and trust me, everything will be okay." But I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Patricia's office was on the 10th floor of a building in downtown Portland with views of the Willamette River. I arrived at 7:45, too anxious to wait. She was already there, sitting at her desk, surrounded by file boxes, and her laptop open to multiple screens of documents. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression was grim. "Sit down, Tom. We need to talk." I sat in the leather chair across from her desk. My mouth was dry. "Is it real? Did Margaret really sign over the restaurant to Daniel?" Patricia pulled out the document Daniel had shown me. I spent all night analyzing this. I also pulled Margaret's signature from our files, from the original LLC agreement, from the lease renewal she signed 2 years ago, from her will. She turned her computer screen toward me. 3 signatures appeared on the screen, enlarged and overlaid on top of each other. "Look at this. This is Margaret's signature from the lease renewal." The signature was bold and confident, with a distinctive loop on the M and a flourish on the final T. "Now look at the signature on Daniel's transfer document." I leaned forward. The signature was similar but not the same. The M was shakier, the loop smaller. The flourish was attempted but didn't have the same natural flow. "It's a forgery," I whispered. "It's a forgery," Patricia confirmed. "I sent it to a forensic document analyst last night, a colleague who owes me a favor. She confirmed it. The pressure patterns are wrong. The ink flow is inconsistent with Margaret's natural handwriting speed. Someone traced this signature, probably from a photograph or another document, and they did a mediocre job of it. A wave of something washed over me. Relief that Margaret hadn't betrayed our life together, but also something darker. Fury at Daniel for forging his own mother's signature. "He forged her name," I said. "Yes, he did. But Tom, that's not even the worst part." I looked at her, confused. What could be worse than fraud? Patricia leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin. "Do you remember when we restructured Anderson's Diner into an LLC 15 years ago?" I thought back. It was around the time Daniel was in college. Patricia had explained that forming an LLC would protect our personal assets from business liabilities, make taxes easier, and provide a clear structure for eventual succession. "I remember you said it would protect us," I said. "Protect you from what?" she asked. "From creditors, from lawsuits, from anyone trying to take what you built." She pulled out a thick binder with Anderson's Diner LLC operating agreement embossed on the cover in gold letters. "When we set up this LLC, we created a very specific ownership structure. Margaret and you were listed as 50-50 members. Yes. But we also created a management structure with specific transfer restrictions. She opened the binder to a marked page. Look at Section 7, Transfer of Membership Interests. It states very clearly that no member can transfer their ownership share without the written consent of all other members. That means Margaret couldn't have given her share to Daniel without your signature, even if she wanted to. I stared at the page. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. So even if that signature was real, I said slowly, even if Margaret had actually signed that document, it wouldn't matter because I never consented to the transfer. Exactly, Patricia said. But there's more. Look at Section 8. She flipped the page. Succession and inheritance. Upon the death of a member, their ownership interest passes according to their last will and testament, not through independent transfer documents. Did Margaret have a will? Yes, I said. We updated them together about 5 years ago. Patricia nodded. I have it right here. She pulled out another document. I, Margaret Anderson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate, including my ownership interest in Anderson's Diner, LLC, to my beloved husband, Thomas Anderson. She looked up at me. Tom, according to Margaret's will, you own 100% of Anderson's Diner. Daniel inherited nothing from the restaurant. Whatever personal assets she had, maybe some savings or jewelry, but not the business. The business is yours, completely and legally yours. The room felt like it was spinning. So Daniel's document is worthless. It's worse than worthless. It's evidence of fraud and attempted theft. He forged his mother's signature to steal a multi-million-dollar business. Patricia closed the binder. But Tom, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I could hear the hesitation in her voice. What is it? Daniel's behavior? The forgery? The pressure? The 72-hour ultimatum? This feels desperate. This feels like someone who needs money urgently and doesn't care how they get it. Has Daniel seemed different lately? Has he had money problems? I thought about it. The new BMW, the expensive suits, the trembling hands at the funeral, the sweat despite the cold, the medicinal smell on his breath. I don't know, I admitted. Margaret handled most of the communication with Daniel. He'd call her, visit her. After she died, he barely spoke to me until yesterday. Patricia made a note on her legal pad. I think we need to dig deeper. I'm going to recommend we hire a private investigator. Someone who can look into Daniel's finances, his activities, his associates. If he's this desperate for money, there's a reason, and we need to know what it is. She paused. Tom, I'm also concerned about something else. What? Margaret's death. You said it was diabetes complications, right? She went into a diabetic coma? I nodded. She was always so careful with her insulin. She had an alarm on her phone. She tracked every dose, every meal. She was meticulous. Patricia's expression was grave. I don't want to alarm you, but given Daniel's behavior, given his obvious financial desperation, given the timing, Margaret died just 3 weeks ago, and suddenly Daniel has a forged document transferring the restaurant to him. Tom, I think we should request a second autopsy. I think we should make sure Margaret's death was natural. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing shallow. You think he killed her? It wasn't a question. I think it's a possibility we can't ignore. Insulin is incredibly dangerous in the wrong doses. Too much insulin can cause hypoglycemia, which leads to coma and death. And it's very hard to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. Patricia reached across the desk and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Tom. I know this is unbearable, but we need to know the truth. I sat there for a long moment, my mind racing. Images flashed through my memory. Daniel visiting Margaret the week before she died, insisting on spending time with her alone.
And that's when I understood.
Daniel in the
The
kitchen of our
journey isn't
apartment,
just about
making her
reaching the
tea.
destination.
Daniel
It's
always
about what
being
you
so
learn
helpful,
along the way.
so attentive. Had it all been a performance? Had he been planning this? Do it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Request the autopsy. I need to know. Patricia nodded. She picked up her phone and dialed. I know someone at the medical examiner's office. Given the circumstances, the suspected fraud, and the financial motive, They'll expedite the request." She made the call, speaking in low, professional tones. When she hung up, she looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. "They're opening an investigation. It'll take about 2 weeks to get the full toxicology results." "What do I do in the meantime?" I asked. "You keep running your restaurant," Patricia said firmly. "You show up tomorrow morning. You make breakfast. You serve your customers. Daniel can claim whatever he wants, but legally, he has no authority over Anderson's diner. If he tries to make changes, if he tries to fire anyone else, you stop him. You're the sole owner. Act like it." The private investigator's name was James Rivera. He was in his mid-50s, built like a retired boxer, with gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie ever told. He showed up at Patricia's office the next afternoon, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, carrying a worn notebook. Patricia introduced us, and we shook hands. His grip was firm. "Mr. Anderson," he said, his voice gravelly. "I'm sorry about your wife." Patricia filled me in on the situation. "I want you to know I take cases like this personally. Nobody should profit from hurting family." We sat down, and I told him everything I knew about Daniel, how he'd moved to Portland 5 years ago after dropping out of a graduate program in Seattle, how he'd worked sporadically, always quitting jobs after a few months, always with some excuse, how Margaret had supported him financially, sending him money for rent, for his car, for whatever he needed, how in the last year he'd become distant, secretive, always needing more money but never explaining why. James wrote in his notebook, occasionally asking questions. Did he have friends? People he spent time with? "I don't know," I admitted. "He never brought anyone around. Margaret worried he was lonely. What about his apartment? Did you ever visit him there?" I shook my head. "He always came to us. Said his place was too small, too messy." Margaret accepted it. I thought it was strange, but I didn't push. James looked up. "Mr. Anderson, in my experience, when someone is this secretive, especially about their living situation and their associates, they're usually hiding something they're ashamed of. Could be gambling, could be drugs, could be debts to dangerous people. I'm going to start there." Over the next 10 days, James Rivera dug into Daniel's life like a surgeon opening a wound. He pulled financial records through legal channels Patricia provided. He surveilled Daniel's apartment. He talked to neighbors. He followed paper trails through bank accounts and credit cards. And what he found was devastating. "He's using cocaine," James said when he returned to Patricia's office. His voice was flat, clinical. He laid out a stack of photographs on the conference table. These were taken over the last week. Daniel meeting with known dealers in Northeast Portland, exchanging money for product in parking lots, in bars, in his apartment. The photos showed Daniel looking paranoid, constantly checking over his shoulder, hands shaking as he completed transactions. "How much is he using?" Patricia asked. "Based on his financial records, he's spending approximately $4,000 to $5,000 a month. That's a severe addiction. He's not a recreational user. He's dependent." James pulled out more documents. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications. He owes money everywhere. Credit cards maxed out, totaling about $75,000. Personal loans from predatory lenders, another $40,000. And this is the scary part. He slid across a photograph of Daniel meeting with a man in an expensive suit outside a downtown bar. The man's face was partially obscured, but his body language was aggressive, intimidating. This man is Viktor Kozlov. He runs a private lending operation, but it's really a front for loan sharking. Very dangerous people, Mr. Anderson. The kind who break bones when they don't get paid. I stared at the photograph, my heart pounding. How much does he owe this man? According to my source, about $90,000. And the interest is accumulating fast. Victor gave Daniel a deadline of December 1st to pay in full, or there will be consequences. James looked at me directly. "Daniel wasn't just trying to steal your restaurant, Mr. Anderson. He was trying to save his own life." Patricia interjected. "That gives him motive, desperate motive, if he needed money that badly, if his life was literally on the line." She didn't finish the sentence, but we all knew what she was thinking. Would he kill his own mother to get it? There's more, James said. He pulled out another set of documents. I had a forensic accountant look at Anderson's diner financial records. Daniel had access to the restaurant accounts, right? Helped with bookkeeping sometimes? Margaret gave him access about 6 months ago, I said. She wanted to teach him about running a business. She thought it would be good for him to learn. James nodded grimly. He's been embezzling. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there. Easy to miss in the daily cash flow of a busy restaurant. But over the last 6 months, he's stolen approximately $38,000. He's been creating fake vendor invoices, padding food orders, skimming cash deposits. He's been robbing you blind. The room was silent. I felt sick. This kid I'd raised, this boy I'd loved, like my own son, had been stealing from us while his mother was still alive. Does he know you're investigating him? I asked James. I don't think so. I've been careful. But Mr. Anderson, you should know that desperate addicts can be unpredictable. If he finds out we're closing in, if he feels cornered, there's no telling what he might do. What do you recommend? Patricia asked. We wait for the autopsy results. If they show what I think they'll show, we go to the police with everything. The forgery, the embezzlement, the drug use, all of it. We build an airtight case. James started gathering his documents. In the meantime, Mr. Anderson should be careful. Don't confront Daniel. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Just keep doing what you're doing, running your restaurant, acting normal. I went back to Anderson's that night. Daniel had indeed been showing up, playing boss, barking orders at the staff, changing menu items without consulting anyone. Rosa told me he'd tried to fire her for
I never thought
questioning
I'd
one
look
of his
back
decisions,
and see that one
but she'd
decision
stood her ground.
changed everything.
This is your restaurant,
But
Tom,
it did, and
she'd
here
said
we
to him.
are.
I don't care what papers you think you have. Tom built this place, and Tom is my boss. Daniel had backed down, but Rosa said he'd been furious. I worked the kitchen like always, making eggs and hash browns, flipping pancakes, preparing the meatloaf that was our Tuesday special. The familiar rhythm of cooking calmed me. This was what I knew. This was who I was. Not a victim, not someone to be pushed around. I was Tom Anderson, and this was my kitchen. Around 9 p.m., as I was closing up, my phone rang. It was Patricia. Her voice was shaking. Tom, we got the preliminary autopsy results. You need to sit down. I sat on a stool in the kitchen, my hands gripping the stainless steel counter. Tell me. The medical examiner found lethal levels of insulin in Margaret's tissue samples. Not just high, Tom. Lethal. Enough to kill someone 3 times over. She didn't die from accidental hypoglycemia. Someone gave her a massive overdose of insulin, probably injected while she was sleeping. It was murder, Tom. Someone murdered your wife. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I'd suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was different. It made it real. My Margaret, my sweet, kind Margaret, who'd never hurt anyone in her life, had been murdered in her sleep. The medical examiner is forwarding the report to the Portland Police Bureau. They're opening a homicide investigation. Given Daniel's financial motive and his access to Margaret, he's going to be the primary suspect. I looked around my kitchen, at the place Margaret and I had built together, at the legacy she'd left behind. When will they arrest him? Soon. The detective in charge is named Sarah Chen. She's good, Tom. She's thorough. She'll want to talk to you, to James, to me. We'll give her everything we have. The forged documents, the embezzlement, the drug debts, all of it. This is going to move fast now. Detective Sarah Chen showed up at my hotel the next morning. She was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She sat across from me in the small hotel room and pulled out a recorder. Mr. Anderson, I need to ask you some questions about your wife's death and about your stepson, Daniel. I told her everything. How Daniel had demanded the restaurant, the forged documents, the 72-hour ultimatum. I gave her the investigation reports from James Rivera. I showed her the LLC operating agreement, proving Daniel had no legal claim. I explained the embezzlement, the cocaine addiction, the debts to Viktor Kozlov. Detective Chen listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she said, Mr. Anderson, we've already obtained a warrant to search Daniel's apartment and to access his phone records. We've also issued a warrant for his arrest on charges of forgery and grand theft related to the embezzlement. The murder charge will follow once we complete our investigation, but we have enough to bring him in now. When? I asked. Today. This afternoon. We're coordinating with Narcotics Division because of his drug connections. We don't want him to have time to destroy evidence or flee. She stood up. Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry for your loss. Your wife deserved better than this. We're going to make sure justice is served. They arrested Daniel at Anderson's diner at 4:30 that afternoon. I wasn't there. I couldn't bear to watch. But Rosa called me and described it. Daniel had been in the middle of berating a new line cook when 6 police officers walked through the door. Detective Chen had approached him calmly and said, Daniel Anderson, you're under arrest for forgery, theft, and suspicion of murder. Rosa said his face went white as chalk. He'd tried to run, actually bolted toward the back door, but 2 officers were already there. They tackled him in the kitchen, handcuffed him on the floor next to the grill where I'd taught him to make pancakes when he was 10 years old. He was screaming, Rosa told me, her voice shaking, screaming that you set him up, that you were framing him, that he didn't do anything wrong. It was awful, Tom, just awful. The trial took 4 months. The evidence against Daniel was overwhelming. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres, presented the forged transfer document alongside the forensic analysis, showing it was fake. They presented the LLC operating agreement proving Daniel had no legal right to the restaurant. They presented the embezzlement evidence, $38,000 stolen over 6 months, traced directly to Daniel's bank accounts and then to his drug dealers and creditors. But the most damning evidence was about Margaret's murder. The medical examiner testified about the lethal insulin levels found in her body. A forensic specialist explained how the insulin had been administered in a single massive dose, likely while she slept. Phone records showed Daniel had been at our apartment the night Margaret died. Security footage from a pharmacy showed him purchasing syringes 3 days before her death, even though he wasn't diabetic and had no medical reason to own them. The prosecutor's theory was clear and brutal. Daniel had been drowning in debt, facing threats from Viktor Kozlov, desperate for money to save his own life. He'd forged the transfer documents planning to steal the restaurant after Margaret died. Then he'd murdered her to set his plan in motion, injecting her with a lethal dose of her own insulin while she slept. He'd expected me to be a pushover, expected to intimidate an old man into signing away everything. He hadn't expected Patricia's legal expertise. He hadn't expected the LLC protections. He hadn't expected me to fight back. Daniel's defense attorney, a nervous young public defender named Karen Williams, tried everything. She claimed the insulin overdose could have been accidental, that Margaret might have made a mistake. The medical examiner destroyed that argument, explaining that the dose was 10 times what even a confused patient might self-administer. She claimed the forged documents were a misunderstanding, that maybe someone else had forged them. The forensic document analyst testified that the forgery was consistent with someone who had access to Margaret's signature and personal effects, someone like her son. She claimed the embezzlement was accounting errors. The forensic accountant walked the jury through each fake invoice, each skim deposit, each deliberate theft. Nothing worked. The jury saw through every excuse. They saw a young man, consumed by addiction and greed, who had killed his own mother for money. The most devastating moment came when they played a recording from Viktor Kozlov's phone. The loan shark had recorded one of his conversations with Daniel as insurance. In it, Daniel was begging for more time. I'll have the money, I swear. My mom's business is worth millions. I just need to get access to it. Give me 1 more month. How you planning to get access? Kozlov's voice was cold. She ain't gonna just hand over a restaurant. There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice, quiet and desperate. I'll figure it out. She trusts me. The implication was clear. He'd figured it out, all right. Figured out how to kill her and forge documents to steal everything she'd built. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, forgery, grand theft. When the verdict was read, Daniel collapsed in his chair. I wasn't in the courtroom. I was at Anderson's diner, working the morning shift, making scrambled eggs and hash browns for the regulars who'd been coming for decades. Patricia called me with the news. He's convicted, Tom, on everything. Sentencing is next month, but the prosecutor is recommending life without parole. I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something break inside me. Not relief, not quite. Something more complicated. Justice for Margaret? Yes. But also the loss of the boy I'd raised, the kid I'd loved, the life that could have been if he'd made different choices. Thank you, Patricia, I managed to say. Thank you for everything. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. I did attend that one. I sat in the front row and watched as Judge Patricia Morrison, a stern woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering, addressed Daniel. Mr. Anderson, she said, you murdered your mother, the woman who gave you life, who raised you, who loved you unconditionally. You did it for money, to feed an addiction, and to escape debts of your own making. You showed no remorse, no humanity, no decency. The law allows me only one appropriate sentence. You are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will never walk free again. Daniel started screaming then. It's not fair. He turned you all against me. Tom poisoned my mother against me. He took everything. This is his fault. The bailiffs had to physically restrain him, dragging him from the courtroom as he shrieked accusations and curses. I sat there, completely still, watching the boy I'd raised disappear through a door into a life behind bars. Patricia put her hand on my shoulder. It's over, Tom. It's finally over. But it wasn't over. Not really. I spent the next month working through grief, working through anger, working through the complicated mess of emotions that comes with loving someone who turned into a monster. Anderson's diner kept running because that's what Margaret would have wanted. Rosa was promoted to general manager. Frank got his job back and became head dishwasher with a raise. We hired new line cooks to replace the ones Daniel had fired. The restaurant hummed along, serving meals, creating memories, being exactly what it had always been. But I couldn't stop thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind. Margaret and I had spent 42 years building Anderson's diner, creating something that mattered. We'd fed people, employed people, been part of the community. And I'd almost lost it all because of greed and addiction and violence. One night, about 6 weeks after the sentencing, I was closing up the restaurant when I had an idea. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. I want to start something, I said. A program for kids who need a chance. Kids from tough backgrounds, who want to learn to cook, who want a career in the restaurant industry. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Tell me more. I want to use the restaurant as a training ground. Free culinary education for underprivileged kids. Teenagers from foster care. Kids aging out of the system. Kids who need a path forward. We'll teach them cooking skills, restaurant management, how to run a business, and when they graduate, we'll help them find jobs, or even start their own places. I looked around my kitchen, at the stoves and prep tables and equipment that had been my life for almost 4 decades. We'll call it the Margaret Anderson Culinary Scholarship Program. Every kid who completes it gets a full scholarship to culinary school if they want to continue their education, or a job placement guarantee if they want to start working right away. Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, her voice thick with emotion, Tom, that's beautiful. Margaret would love that. She'd be so proud. I'm going to use the money from the lawsuit settlement against Daniel's estate, I continued. The embezzled funds, everything. Turn his theft into something good. Turn his greed into opportunity for kids who deserve better. We launched the Margaret Anderson Culinary Scholarship Program 6 months later. The first class had 12 students, all teenagers from difficult backgrounds. I taught them personally, showing them how to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl, how to flip pancakes, how to make Margaret's famous blackberry pie. I taught them what she'd taught me, that cooking is about more than just food. It's about caring for people, about creating something with your hands that brings joy to others. Watching those kids learn and grow, watching them discover their own potential, something in me started to heal. Not completely, maybe never completely, but enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to build something that would outlast me. If there's one thing I learned from this nightmare, it's this. Never underestimate the power of building something real. The world is full of people like Daniel, people who want shortcuts, who think money is everything, who'll destroy anything and anyone to get what they want. But true wealth isn't in a bank account or a business valuation. True wealth is in what you create, who you help, and what you leave behind. Daniel saw an old man running a diner. He thought he could intimidate me, steal from me, erase me. He didn't see the 42 years of marriage behind me. He didn't see the legal protections Margaret and I had built. He didn't see the loyalty of people like Patricia and Rosa and Frank. He didn't see that the restaurant was more than bricks and equipment. It was a legacy, a family, a community. He saw only what he wanted to see, and it destroyed him. Now I'm asking you, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Have you ever had to fight to protect something you built with your own hands? Tell me your story in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe that real strength comes from loyalty and hard work, please hit that subscribe button. Because at the end of the day, the people who build things, who create value, who help others, those are the people who win. Not the thieves, not the addicts, not the murderers, the builders. Always the builders.